So welcome everybody. We're back with investor success stories. We have Shawn here, and Mr. Shawn Quigg is a lawyer. Remind me the name of your law firm again, Shawn.
Hey, Paul, it's Prosperous Law.
Prosperous Law. Yes, you just started this law firm recently. Is a new venture for you. Am I correct?
Yeah, we're through 4 months so far, so yeah, pretty new.
And you work specifically with investors. Like your business is tailored to help investors through real estate transactions. Now corporate law. You were explaining to me, like, what else you got going on there?
Yeah, so the law firm is for real estate investors and for people in real estate adjacent industries. So things like mortgage brokers and real estate agents, et cetera. But ultimately, I launched the firm to create impact on the lives and businesses of other investors. I'm an investor too. I started investing in real estate before I became a lawyer. And what I saw as I was coming up in the industry and getting into real estate investing and joining the groups and going to the meetings was that no one was really happy with their lawyer uh, because, generally, they're in the headspace of law, not really in the headspace of the business of real estate. So what I thought to do is sort of combine, my interest and my hobby of investing in real estate with my profession, and that's landed me sort of here today.
No, that's great. That's kind of why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because it's, most lawyers out there, and even the ones who close real estate transactions, I mean, they're, and not to say anything bad about it, but it seems more like they're on a transaction treadmill. Like they're out there closing transactions. It's sometimes hard to get their time when you might need them for counsel or to do an agreement and stuff like that. And I find you seem to be more accessible, and you just said it, but I always figured it's because you're an investor yourself. And I think that's important when you're, helping other investors, is you got to be able to walk your talk. So I appreciate that about you. So people kind of understand what you do as a profession and how you relate to real estate. But this is about people's success stories, and I know you have some successful stories there. Share with us what's been some of your more successful real estate ventures.
Well, I've had a couple of big wins, or bigger wins in the grand scheme of things. The first one was my very first property. When I got into law school in Windsor, a buddy of mine told me, yeah, this was back in 2015. So my buddy told me, hey, if you get into Windsor, buy a house. They're so cheap. And he was right. I bought a 5-bedroom house for $133,000.
Wow.
And took one of the rooms, made another one an office, and then I rented out the other three. And all of a sudden, it wasn't long, a couple of months, and I was cash flow positive, which was really great. I didn't know what house hacking was, or I needed to replace my income. I left a job to go to law school, so to be able to live for free and like to have beer money, which is an essential component of getting through law school, was pretty cool. So.
Especially in Windsor.
Oh, well, yes. Windsor gets a bad rap, but I quite enjoyed my time in Windsor. I like Windsor a lot. And, what I realized pretty early on was that I should probably keep doing this. So, I took some capital I had access to and bought a second house. And this time I learned my lessons from the first one. I bought much closer to the university, much bigger house, and all of a sudden I owned a second student rental and I was cash flowing again. And this was great, right? So I, in essence, lived for free and generated some passive income while going to law school. And then, when I moved out of Windsor, I sold the first one and made well into $100,000+ So
Yeah.
in essence, paid for law school with that.
Yeah,
You know,
that's fantastic.
yeah, while having my mortgage paid down by my tenants, who, by the way, I didn't have to comply with the Residential Tenancies Act because I shared a kitchen and a living space with them. So I did have some more difficult tenants, and they just had to get out. They didn't have any recourse to the landlord tenant board, which was great. And then the second one I just sold. That one was chugging along really well, January 2020, I get notice from all 6 of my students saying, hey, we're moving out in May or end of April. I'm like,
Mhm.
perfect. This is great. It's
Yeah.
time to cycle,
So
and yeah, I'm gonna launch it or ratchet up the rent, maybe 50, $60 a month times 6. That's fantastic, right? Wrong. COVID starts, 2 weeks later, and students don't want anything to do with student rent, student housing. No one's going back to school. So, all of a sudden that really ground to a halt. So what did I do? I had to learn Airbnb, and I started Airbnb it by the room. And all of a sudden my $500 rooms were $900 rooms.
really, in Windsor.
Yeah. By the time I got it really figured out, I was 90% full at $900 a room, or
Hmm.
800 to $1,000 a room. So, that was a big win. And Airbnb is tough to master. And I won't even pretend like I had mastered, but I was doing pretty well. And I just sold that at the end of the summer this year, and turned a pretty good profit. So all things considered, those are a couple of big wins. I've also sold another multi-unit because I eventually transitioned to multifamily,
Hmm.
and recently sold one of those buildings. It had done very well for me, but times at the time of our recording today, like things are a little difficult, and I'm playing a little bit of defense. So I decided to sell a couple things, free up some capital to give myself a little bit of safety, and that building did that for me.
Yeah.
It lost, as interest rates rose, it lost its value. Of course, when we look at the valuation of multifamily, interest rates plays a big part on that net operating income, and how much a property's worth on the cap rate calculation. So it did take a hit, but I was able to sell it and freed up some capital, freed up some equity, and so that's another big win that really helped out in a time when we all can use a little extra capital.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hear this story not often, but it's often enough that it just reminds you that having good real estate assets, that cash flow that you can maintain over a period of time, it just gives you more options. Like I'm sure you're starting a new business here. You moved out on your own. You might have fluctuations in cash flow in your business because it's new and you're developing a client base. And if you had zero properties, you'd be like, uh-oh, you know what I mean? But having some assets behind you probably gave you some confidence to go out on your own too, and knowing you have some capital behind you. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. And going out on my own was a terribly frightening prospect.
Yes.
It it continues to be, right? But when you set your goal, which is to create impact on others, right? Now it's not me, it's not about me, but on others. That expression of value, that consistent giving, really does come back. And we've had a really great start. We're 4.5 months in now, and people are generally pretty happy and enjoy working with us. And we've come up with something pretty cool.
Yeah, good for you, man. I like it. It's unique in the marketplace, but I think you're gonna start getting more and more of people following. And I think people are loyal. That's a mouthful. Loyal to their lawyers once they start using them. So we'll try and expose you to the database of our investors, and I think they're going to find value working with you. Uh, Now, here's a good question. You shared some highs, but I mean, let's be honest. This is real estate investing, and for every high, there's at least a story on the other side. Like, what are some of the lows? Like, do you have any tenant? Tell me some of the tenant problems. How'd you solve them? Like, big renovation, a flood. Give me a few there.
I have a wood chair beside me, and I'm going to go ahead and knock on it. I've never had a tenant problem that was anything more than fleeting.
Okay,
I
good.
had a student that was consistently late. I had another tenant who stuck around for a number of months without paying, but he left. I basically said, "Listen, I know you're not going to pay me. I need you to go," and he did.
Good, yeah.
So,
Good
like,
example.
I've been really fortunate with tenants, but I definitely have some lows. As you pointed out, this is real estate. Nothing ever goes according to plan. I write an email to my list every day with legal tips, transactional tips, entrepreneurial mindset stuff. And I talk about my Moby Dick project that just won't write itself often. And it's my waterfront cottage. So the story of the waterfront cottage is a story of mistakes, a story of changing game plans, a story of making money on the buy and subsequently giving it away, uh, and a story of perseverance. So I'll set it up for you. I had an opportunity to buy a waterfront property back 2.5 years ago for 160,000.
Wow. Where's this?
This is in a little town called Erio, which if you don't know Erio, you may know Blenheim. And if you don't know Blenheim, you'll likely know Chatham. Those
Uh,
are sort of in a line from Lake Erie to Chatham.
yep.
And as you know, Paul, they're not really making waterfront property anymore. And I
Yep.
thought for sure that this is a win. I didn't even go look at it. Now I had a coach, a mentor who was sort of helping me in the background, and he was pretty sure it was worth as is, well above what we were paying for. So our first strategy was wholesale. Let's buy this thing, get it listed immediately, and then see if we can make a spread.
Yep.
Listed immediately, nothing. Like,
Nothing.
turns out it was in horrific shape. Horrific. Like the worst place you've ever
Coming
seen.
to the thought first age.
And yes, should have saw it first. So mistake number one was not realizing that I needed to change strategies sooner. I let it sit on the market for 4 months before I decided, okay, I got to do something about this. That was a mistake. I should have actually just seen the light. I saw the light, but I just didn't act on it. And so then we started renovation. But instead of raising the capital, doing the research on the ARV, and bringing in a legitimately large contractor, I hired a friend of mine who'd done some work for me on my properties in Windsor. We thought we could turn it around in 6 weeks or so. Well, not only I had enough money to hit the budget that he had given me, but it was not realistic. And as the project evolved into what it is now, the budget in essence went up 10x, and the time to do it all centupled. Like it was a 2-year renovation. It should have been an 8 to 8 month renovation, but I didn't raise enough capital in time. I took my time raising capital. I sort of shut the project down. I didn't have a contractor going. When I finally did bring in a team, they got going a bit, but they weren't that great. And so we finally got it finished and listed just in time for 4 interest rate hikes in a row, right? And no one wants to buy a recreational property. So tremendous looking property. We had to redo the break wall. We had to, redo some of the exterior walls. The place looks amazing. And this is where the perseverance comes in, because now it's got to transition to another strategy, which is holding it and short-term renting it.
Yep.
And creating a really great, place for people to go and enjoy themselves. So we continue to build towards that. Almost done with the furnishing, and we'll have it on the platforms here soon. But that project has been one of lessons. I've learned the very first thing I learned in real estate was if you try and save pennies, you lose dollars. And I have learned that lesson time and again with this project, and I've learned it other times too. And I continue to be reminded of, the wisdom in that. And that project, it'd be really nice to get a resolution on that one.
Yeah, I'm smiling along with you. Not that I'm celebrating your pain, but I'm celebrating the lessons, because we anybody who's been in this business for a long time, who's acquired a lot of properties, at least from my experience, talking about myself and all the clients that I coach and mentor, Like this is standard operating procedure. Every story is different in how it comes along, but everybody's bound to learn these lessons. And I find it comes in the same way. Like you get some success, and then the real estate gods are like, oh yeah, you think that's successful? Here,
Yeah.
learn this, and they just shovel a pile of crap on you, and you gotta figure out how to get out of that, and not only get out of it, but learn along the way. And I think that's what gets people to love real estate, because they end up solving the problems. They turn a problem into a profit and end up helping themselves and other people along the way. And it feels good. It feels good to go on those journeys and get things done and achieve your own goals at the same time. That's fantastic. So I got no doubt you're going to find a way, man. I got no doubt about it. So let me ask you something different here. What's from a mental perspective, what's been some of your obstacles? Like, has fear stopped you before? As kind of a scarcity mindset, that's a common one. Like, has there been anything that's kind of mentally gripped you and kind of blocked you from seeing the right way forward, or blocked you from taking the right action?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of instances in the cottage project where some poor choice or poor thinking, right? Thinking small really got in the way, right? Like, I was afraid of raising private money to start. I was afraid of higher interest rates, right? This is before I really learned that private money is like the best. But I was afraid, and so instead of just getting over it and doing something, I let that project languish for a few months, and that's progress that I never got. That cost me way more than any interest rate, way more. If I'd finished that project in 12 months, let's say, instead of 8 or 2 years, that property would have sold,
Yep.
and I wouldn't be dealing with it now. And it would have sold at the top of the market, pre-interest rate hikes, right? Being afraid of 15 or 16 or 18% interest probably cost me 6 figures in value.
Yeah.
So, like, dumb, right? That's trying to save pennies and lose dollars. Being afraid of getting a quote from a large contracting company, a company that could really actually handle this project in a timely manner, that has cost me even more, because this is a project that should have only taken a few months. So fear has really been my worst, my work, the giving me the most aggravation. And what I've learned about fear is you just have to battle through it, see for what it is, right? And one of my mentors says fear has no place on paper. So when I start to feel anxious about something or fearful, I write it down. And yeah, that helps frame it in, like, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? What's the action plan? What are we doing? What's the result? How do we get there?
Yeah, I find fear is probably the underlying kind of emotion that resonates for a lot of people, even myself too. We're all human, and I think if you're not afraid, you should be checking yourself, because you might be a robot or an alien or something. So, if you're dealing with fear, it just means you're human.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of our journey we learn, and the more you overcome fear, it's like doing push-ups. The more you overcome it, the easier it is to do the next time. So I think that's a big one. And I the beauty about that is, and you're a smart guy, Shawn. So, like, I highly doubt you're going to make the same mistake again, right? Or if it is, and if you do, it's going to hurt twice as much, because the universe is going to teach you twice as bad, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Usually, I find real estate investors only make those mistakes once, and then they learn the lesson. That's cool, man. So, shifting gears for a sec, like, what made you want to become a lawyer? Was there any inspiration there, family, or just something you always wanted to do? Like, what was it?
Good question. Before I went to law school, I had a career with the federal government, and I worked in immigration enforcement, and I performed a role that was actually quite similar to a lawyer. I represented the Minister of Public Safety in immigration matters pertaining to two things. Number one, admissibility to Canada. So what that means is, if you're not a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, you must seek entry to Canada when you show up here. And there are a litany of reasons why you are not allowed to come into or remain in Canada. These are things like having a criminal record, being a terrorist, lying on your applications, being a war criminal, the list goes on. So my job was to represent that, if we found a terrorist here, hiding here, or, whatever it might be, we would bring them to a hearing and say, hey, this person's a terrorist, here's the evidence. And an independent adjudicator would decide if we made our case. And if they did, then this person would be issued a deportation order and then removed. The second type of matter that I dealt with were arrests under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. That legislation permits the Minister of Public Safety to arrest people and place them in detention if there are reasons to believe they won't show up to a hearing or to their removal, or if they're a danger to the public, and there's a few other reasons. So, when people are arrested, they get bail hearings. So I would represent the minister in those bail hearings and present the minister's case. So you can start to see, this job looks and feels like being a lawyer, but isn't one, which was great. I really got into what I was doing, and I believed in the cause. And because I saw the evidence, we had people coming here and doing horrific things, they can't stay. So, when I lost my very first big case, we have recourse to the federal court, and the Department of Justice, a government agency that hires lawyers to represent the government in court proceedings, took over, and we won. And, I played a big part in helping out those lawyers prepare and get their materials done. And what I realized was I was playing small. Those guys were playing big, right? They're lawyers. They're going to federal court. They're having way more impact than I am. And so I set my sight on being a Department of Justice lawyer and actually taking the mission and doing it at a bigger level. And then, so I get into law school. And week one, we're in orientation. We're learning about all the different things you can do with your law degree. And that was the moment I decided I'm never going back to work in the public sector ever again.
I don't blame you.
There is nothing wrong with working in the public sector. It's just not for me. Yeah. And because what I realized was you can work your butt off. You can do lots of really great things. You can be a great performer, but it doesn't matter. But it does in the private sector.
Yeah.
So that's, I wanted to create that impact on others and also reap the benefits of creating that impact. So here I am.
Well, that's a good story. It's a common theme. Most of the investors I talk to, even the ones that do work for the government and public sector, they're very entrepreneurial in spirit, and it's sort of what they do there in their job has become just that, a job, and their interests and their drive and what enthuses them to do more is the entrepreneurial spirit, the stuff they do in real estate and business and on the side and all that kind of cool stuff. So that's a common theme. I'll share a quick story if you don't mind. I mean, believe it or not, I don't know if I told you this or not, but I used to work for the public sector too. I was a fireman in Toronto. So, and is a great gig. I mean, anyone listening to this has probably heard this story before, so I'll make it quick, but great gig. I mean, one of the best jobs in the world. If you're going to have one, you get to do a bunch of cool stuff. You get to do a bunch of cool training, learn cool skills. You hang around with some very interesting men, even some women too. And it's you couldn't ask for more. You never have a boring day, but even that. How did I put this and be nice about it? Whenever the government's involved, they tend to take the fun and interesting part out of it.
Yeah.
As soon as the Toronto Fire, at least when I was there, and I started in 2010. And not that I was part of the old boys club or anything, but when I got there, when I started, there wasn't there was still an old boys club, like the guys with the burly mustaches and the kind of firemen you'd look up in the dictionary, like that's a fireman. They were around, and those guys were, they might not have. That's not the kind of guy you want to interview on global news, but they were very good for the job. And but as things changed and HR, like the city's HR, got involved in hiring and dictating policies, a lot of the customs and traditions that we got used to kind of had to go away, and it turned this great thing into just a job, and took the life out of it. And that was looking back, it was interesting. So I kind of feel where you're coming from there, but I'm glad I had real estate going on in the background, and I decided to focus on it full time too. So now, what else? What's next for you? Like you got this project going on, Chatham Way. Are there any other investments you're trying to do, or you're still raising money? Like what's on the horizon for you as an investor, as an entrepreneur?
Well, I have another company that I launched in the spring this year called Upfront Capital. And so Upfront Capital lends the deposit on a conditional deal during the conditional period. So this would be for people that are buying large commercial multifamily, industrial, large commercial, or vacant land to build on, or people buying businesses, any sort of agreement where there's a conditional period where the deposit is substantial enough that you don't want to stick it in some lawyer or realtor's trust account.
Yeah.
And, I'll give you an example. So we're working on a deal right now. A guy's buying, I don't know, 80 units up north, needs $150,000 deposit. He could go and get a second on a property he owns if he's got it. But that takes, a few weeks. You're going to pay a bunch in broker fees, lender fees.
Second mortgage, to be clear for anyone who's listening.
Sorry, yeah, second mortgage.
Yeah.
And, you zap up all that equity for 4 weeks, 8 weeks. We actually lend no mortgage. We lend that deposit, so you don't have to worry about mortgages. Our stuff gets done in a matter of days, and that frees up the capital you do have to spend on your own due diligence instead of sitting it in some trust account.
Wow. So let me get that straight. So let's say I buy a piece of land because I like development stuff. The land is $1 million. I have to put up $100,000 deposit, and I'm closing in 90 days. So instead of pulling that $100,000 deposit from my own capital or raising it in my network or pulling it from a line of credit, I can say, Shawn, I want to work with Upfront Capital. I need that 100 grand, and it's going to close. The property is going to close in 90 days, and then I have to have some kind of, obviously, my capital and financing arranged to pay you back. Is that correct?
Almost. So we only lend during the conditional period.
Oh, okay.
The conditional period now turns into, you're doing two things. You're doing your due diligence, right? Generally, the conditional periods for due diligence at this level, right? Is this a deal? Can we build what we want to build? Does the property perform or generate a net operating income that we think? What's the environmental? What's the roof? What's the HVAC? How's the electrical looking? That sort of thing. It also is a period of time to now raise your capital, which you're generally, most of us are doing anyways. But now, what we found is investors don't want to sit their money in trust accounts. There's 0% return, which means it's a loss. And there's an opportunity cost as well, because you could have spent that money or earned, some return for that 60 days, let's say. So what we do is we fund that period of time where you're doing your due diligence and raising your capital. Once you have your investor capital, or at least some of it, to be able to take us out. You can't go firm without paying the loan back, but upon paying the loan back, you can go firm. So this is for that period of time where you're actually trying to figure out if this is a deal or not.
So let's go back to my examples. Let's say I have a piece of land, $1 million. I need $100,000 deposit. And let's say I asked for a due diligence period in the offer for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it is. So let's say it's 4 weeks. So for that, you're going to lend me that 100 grand for that 4 weeks. So at the end of 4 weeks, I have to have a pathway to repay the loan.
That's right. That's exactly it.
Okay, correct. Now, what does that cost? Like, let's use that $100,000 example for me. Like, what does that cost me for those 4 weeks, for let's say?
Well, we charge a lender fee.
Mhm.
And I think for a 1 month loan, the lender fee is 2.75%. And interest is, I think, 1.25% a month. So
1% per month.
yeah. So that
So
might cost you $4,000. So 3,500.
yeah, so $2,750 a lender fee, and then $1,250 in interest for the month.
Yeah.
So $4,000. So it cost me $4,000 to have my money kind of sit safely in my pocket. So from my perspective, I'm thinking about that, like that's a cost. That's part of my due diligence cost, because I'm gonna have to pay for an appraisal. I'm gonna have to pay for maybe a phase one, an ESA report, a
Yeah.
geotechnical, all this kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like not everyone has 100,000 just sitting around,
No.
right? And if you're smart, you don't, right? You
Yeah, if
want
you're using other people's money, yeah, it's
yeah.
you're used to doing this anyway.
This is the last part of the real estate deal that's not fully leveraged.
Yeah, that's
And
very interesting.
yeah, so we're trying to solve that problem, which is people want to do deals, but the deposit capital is getting outrageous. Now you got to submit proof of funds with offers. So, we can help with that, and we help bridge that gap to make sure that people are able to actually get. Our motto is make better offers, do more deals. Right, you're not limited by your capital. You can offer higher deposits, which for some reason sellers value. Right, so now you might get more deals under contract because you offered some ridiculous deposit in a conditional period, which doesn't matter anyways.
Yeah, I
And
can
as a
see
result,
this.
you can underwrite more deals and make more money, which means more deals for realtors, for mortgage brokers, for more housing, more warehouse space, more businesses acquired. It doesn't really matter. Like you get to make better offers and do more deals.
Yeah, it's a conduit. It's a catalyst to help smooth the deals over, make them go faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can see it, and correct me if I'm wrong. I can see it working well. I think you said this already, but I see it working well more for a commercial transaction with a longer due diligence period or a land deal, but not like a buying a house or a duplex with a 5-day conditional period. Am I right?
No, it's like we got minimums. So it's a minimum. If you go to our website, our minimum loan's 100,000 and our minimum term's 30 days. So
Good.
yeah, it is for the bigger stuff. We are trying desperately to solve for the smaller stuff. There are companies out there that are doing it, and we're also trying to solve for wholesalers and people like that. But it's a tough equation,
Yeah.
and it's also because of the short term. Actually, the criminal code comes into play
Mm.
and being able to charge, the way that effective interest rates are calculated in relation to the criminal code and criminal interest, the short term really actually kills the viability of doing
Yeah.
like a 5-day or 2-week conditional period.
That seems like a safe space though, because those kind of transactions, there's a need for it, and there's room for it in the marketplace. So yeah, no, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm glad we talked about that.
So
That's
that's
cool.
that's a long way of saying, I'm focusing on those two companies. That's what's next, is really building, right, creating that value, and just give, right? And then in terms of the real estate side, I'm playing defense right now. I got to get this cottage thing like operational and profitable, and then we'll be right back to it. I'll go right back to multifamily. I like multifamily as an asset class, and I like the ability to sort of manipulate the project to perform better, right, by optimizing it, making it more efficient, and then refinancing. Right, the BRRRR strategy in multifamily is awesome when we're not dealing with comparables, but we're dealing with net operating income.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with
Yeah,
you. That's been my bread and butter for a long time. Um, Now, let me ask you one more question.
sure.
I think it's an important one to kind of show the kind of value you can bring on the legal side. Like, take me through an example, either hypothetical or a real example you experienced in the past where working with you, who's I'll describe you as a investor focused lawyer, real estate investor focused
Yeah,
lawyer, is different or better than just working with, a transaction run-of-the-mill kind of lawyer. That makes sense?
Yeah, well, let's be clear. Any real estate lawyer can close your deal.
Yes,
And
100%.
no question, right? The difference is in the in-between, between the period of time that you find the deal and the period of time you close the deal. Most lawyers, most lawyers that help investors, even if, most, they're not investor focused for the most part. They're a necessary component. You need a lawyer to close a deal in Ontario, but they're not a true value add. And that's what I think you're getting at, is what is that value add? Well, it comes in a couple of different ways. Number one, we run what we call strategic and enhanced due diligence, right? So just like when you're buying a multi, you're checking the leases to make sure the rents are what the seller said they were. You're checking the utility bills, you're checking the property tax, you're checking the insurance, right? That's business due diligence. We do legal due diligence, and we do strategic and enhanced. So what we're looking for, we're doing searches of various databases, or doing searches with various municipal offices, etc., to find one of two things: either a way to avoid a problem in the future, because nothing slows us down like realizing after closing that property taxes aren't paid, for instance. Now we got to go through the emails, we got to go through the documents. If you're the buyer, you're going to send me an email going, why isn't this done? Then I got to send emails to the seller's lawyer. And it's turns into this whole thing. We don't want that. We don't want that for you. Right? Obviously, I could do with less emails, but it's not about me. It's about you, the buyer. You've got other things to do than worry about property tax payments that should have been taken care of on your deal. So that's one way of avoiding problems. Now, there's more problems to avoid than property tax. There's zoning, there's building, there's fire, there's electrical, the list goes on and on. So we're looking to help people avoid problems in the future by dealing with them in advance. The second thing, the more exciting thing, this is more rare, but when it happens, it's awesome, is creating opportunities to negotiate better deals. When you sign an agreement of purchase and sale, generally you make a bunch of representations and warranties. And to sort of bring that down from the legalese side to a good conversation, those are basically promises or statements about the state of being of certain things. And when you make representations and or warranties in a contract, and it turns out you're not telling the truth, you got them, right? Like, you're in trouble. So when we do searches to back up the representations and warranties. Because if we find a rep and warranty that's not actually true, now it's time to negotiate.
Yeah.
Now it's time to be like, hey, look, you said X, but here's the proof that that's not true. So I'm going to need money off, or I'm going to need a VTB, or I'm going to need XYZ, or I'm out of this deal and you're going to have to give me your deposit back, and I'm going to sue you.
Okay, wait, and let me stop you for a second. I want to give some examples, because I think I know exactly what you're talking about. So let's say we're doing deals with investors, weekly. So let's say it's a typical transaction. We're buying a triplex in, Kitchener.
Yeah.
Typically, I am doing, I'm helping the client do a lot of that due diligence during the conditional period and checking the leases, checking the zoning, make sure if they say it's a triplex, it's actually a triplex, all that kind of stuff. But what you're saying is that you're proactively doing those kind of searches also from the perspective of a lawyer. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, let's take zoning. Zoning's a great example.
Yes, okay. So this is a big one, the biggest one.
It's the one we see the most impact on.
Of course.
Okay, so if we think about the standard form ORIA agreement in its present form, not December 1st present form, today present form, in section 8, we set out, or the seller sets out, the use of the property.
Present use.
Yeah, present use, right? Let's say they wrote in triplex. Fantastic. That's exactly what we wanted them to write in. That is a representation that this is a triplex. Okay. Very good. So you run the zoning, or you take a look at the zoning bylaw and you go, yeah, it's zoned for a triplex. Great. Right? Everything seems good. Except I'm going to run 2 searches. I'm going to run a zoning and a building. Here's why. Zoning is going to tell me whether or not this is legal use or legal non-conforming, which means it was legal at one point. Then the bylaw changed to make it illegal. But because, you're not going to go around and make everybody change their properties when you change the zoning bylaw, it's just now non-conforming, but it's still legal. It's grandfathered in essence.
AKA grandfather, yeah.
Yes. But we run building. And here's why. If the person who bought that property when it was legal to make it a triplex didn't get a building permit for a triplex, then that is an illegal triplex. The city still thinks it's a single family home. So now we go, oh, look at this. This has never actually been legalized, even though it is legal in the sense that it meets the zoning or is grandfathered. It would not be a legal triplex because it was never actually created.
So it might be legal in terms of meeting the criteria, but the city has not recognized it as a triplex. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. And what matters, who's going to enforce the zoning bylaw? There's only one party, and it's the city.
Yep.
So that's all that matters. What is the city going to do? So
It either is or it isn't.
That's right. Now it's time to negotiate. We have this exact thing happening right now. We had a client who was buying a fourplex. Well, it turns out there was never a building permit to turn into a four. Somebody made a fourplex out of a single family home without building permits at some point decades ago. So we've got a holdback, and the seller's got to do everything they can to make it a legal fourplex, which is actually not that much because it is zoned for 4 units. It's really just get an inspector in and make sure that it's, decently close to code, which it apparently is. But if they don't do it in a certain period of time, our client keeps the holdback.
Yeah, because if they've, and I've run into this situation before, and it's, and like, I'm not crapping on lawyers in general, but like, it's for lack of a better word, it's at that point when you're beyond conditions and you're a week or 2 or 3 before closing, it's almost a distraction for them because they're like in their queue. It's like, okay, this thing is closing in 3 weeks. I don't have to do anything right now. I just have to make sure somebody gets their money and we're done. But a lot of them are not set up to have time to like put away their schedule and get on the phone and get on emails and deal with all this kind of stuff. And
there's more to it.
Yeah,
They
there's a lot.
rely on the title insurance.
Oof.
Right? Title insurance solves a lot of these problems, but title insurance is great in theory, but they're an insurance company. They're in the business of denying claims. On top of that, it takes a long time to deal with. So, this goes back to trying to avoid problems post-closing. Why would we not deal with this in advance? Our clients got a great solution. They got a property they want that's going to be legalized, and they've got a holdback to stick it to the seller to make them do it. And if they don't, they get to keep it. Like basically a reduction in purchase price.
Yeah.
For a thing they could actually just do themselves. It isn't that hard.
No, that's a really good point, and that's where we run into a lot of trouble. No, that's a great example. No, that's great, Shawn. What else? Anything else you wanted to add? Any little piece of value that I'm not asking that you want to share with kind of the listeners here?
Like we run in the same circles, and I'm pretty sure we probably share the same viewpoint on this. It doesn't matter if it's you or me, but if you're a real estate investor, you've got to work with people who are in the business themselves. I can't stress this enough because that's the difference between a good and a great deal or a bad and a not so bad or a really bad to a good deal is working with people who are in the business. That's why you have clients come back to you over and over and over again because you're in it. You're building stuff. You got stuff in the islands. You got stuff here. And you're in it every single day, right? Rockstars, all over it, right? This is their whole point of existence. And so, I tell people, even if it's not me, find a lawyer who also invests in real estate. There's only a couple of us. I know them all. I've got them in my, I could call them right now because we actually work together. We collaborate because it's such a small community of lawyers that are actually, able to really add value here. And so we help each other. So that really is the last thing I want to give, even if it's not me. If you're listening to this, find someone, make sure your power team is full of people who are in the game themselves, because that's the difference between here and here.
Yeah. I'm glad you said it and I didn't have to. I mean, you got to be able to walk your talk in this game. So, I mean, you wouldn't go to a doctor who's given to give you health advice if he's there hammering a cheeseburger with, resting his Coke on his gut, right? Like you gotta walk your talk.
Yeah.
People are gonna figure out real quick, which is why I try and be as authentic as possible, even if people don't like what I have to say. It's okay because our reputation in this game is everything. So we want you to succeed. That's why you gotta follow that rate. Okay, great, Shawn. I appreciate you doing this. I think this is a great way to share your message with our people, and if they people want to connect with you, and we'll leave your contact information below. But just in case, if people want to connect with you, how do they find you? Website, email, whatever it is.
Well, they can find us all over the socials. Find the law firm and me, Instagram, Facebook. You can find me SP Quigg at Prosperous Law on either of those platforms. I'm largely on Facebook and Instagram. You can send me an email, Shawn, SHAWN, at prosperouslaw.ca. You can find us on the internet, but socials is the best way to reach me. And I look forward to hearing from whoever might need some help.
That's awesome, Shawn. Thank you, my friend.
Okay, Paul, thank you. This has been great.